Here we go. So the second handout that I gave you is the notes. The first handout is a textbook kind of that goes into more detail. But for now, we're going to be talking about energy flow in ecosystems. Now, those are some words that we'll need to define. All life on Earth is eventually recycled. Sorry. You're going to die someday. Every one of you. I'm sorry, but sorry. That how life works. All of you will die someday, but that's also important. All of the energy that you currently have in you right now was once used by other life forms in the past, and then it was used by other life forms in the past, and other life forms in the past. There's a limited amount of energy here on the Earth, and that energy gets passed on from life form to life form, from level to level. Think about what it would be like if the leaves that fall every year never decomposed. Just in 1 year, you get a layer quite thick in the forest. Can you imagine if year after year after year, the leaves stayed, but didn't vanish, didn't decompose? Or if the body of every single animal that ever died was still laying where it had fallen? This topic is about how energy moves into, through, and out of ecosystems, and how nutrients cycle through ecosystems, getting used over and over and over and over and over. Here's probably a good vocabulary word, maybe underline or put a star next to it. Biomass. That's the term that we use to describe the total mass of living plants, animals, fungi, bacteria in a given area. The amount of biomass is usually given as an estimate. Because we can't actually weigh all of it. We do a small survey in an area and then we multiply, but we're gambling that the biomass is spread out evenly. Maybe by a fluke, the area that we surveyed is really empty, or maybe by a fluke, the area that we surveyed is really, really full for some reason. But if we do enough surveys and kind of spread out our data, we can be pretty close. It's usually estimated in grams or kilograms per square meter. How many kilograms per square meter? Square meter is about that way by that way, or how many grams of life you have there. What do you think has a greater biomass, plants or animals? What is there more of on the Earth if you added them up and put them all on a scale, plants or animals? So for the next 30 seconds, you're going to do just a guessing activity with the person that you're sitting next to, your lab partner. I've given you 4 different life forms. I'd like you to rank them, with 1 being the most, not most common, most amount, and 4 being the least from these 4 here. Within, let's say, a 10 hectare, that's a 100 meter, that's a 10 kilometer by 10 kilometer section of forest. So grasses, caterpillars, birds, grizzly bears. Which of these do you think has the largest biomass? That gets a 1. Which of these do you think has the smallest biomass? That gets a 4. Take 30 seconds on your own and try and guess. What do you think has the largest biomass? What did you put a 1 next to? What's next?
Birds. I say cat. I say bird. Cat. I said birds. Stop! And then birds.
Just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not there. In fact, you'll learn later on, I'll show you a short video, there is a life form that all of you probably haven't seen. If you add up its biomass, it's more than all of the other life forms on the planet added together. There's a whole bunch of ecosystems going on out of our viewpoint that we're not aware of, but they're crucial for the world to work. Now, this is not a coincidence. You may notice that grizzly bears might eat birds, birds might eat caterpillars, caterpillars might eat grasses. What you're going to find is the way energy gets passed up through ecosystems, you always lose some on every food chain step, and there's less energy, which means there's less animals that can survive, less biomass that can survive at that level. And then there's less biomass that can survive at the next level. Energy flow. The transfer of energy through the ecosystem is called energy flow. Probably a good vocabulary word. Organisms, life forms, obtain energy when they eat plants or animals or other living creatures, mushrooms, fungi, bacteria, but primarily plants and animals. Where does, looking at the picture, where does all of the energy to sustain life come from originally? The sun. The sun. All starts with the sun. All of our energy comes from the sun. If the sun vanishes, the earth is going to vanish, is going to die off pretty quick. Okay? If there was, for example, if the sun collapsed into a black hole, gravitationally, we wouldn't notice a difference. We're far enough away, we wouldn't be able to tell. We would still stay in orbit. We would notice a massive difference in that no longer was any light or heat reaching us, which means the energy source for all of the life on the Earth is no longer reaching us. Various estimates have been done. Probably within about 2 or 3 years, all life would be gone on Earth. Okay? Preview of coming attractions, if that ever happens. Organisms contribute energy to an ecosystem when they are eaten or when they decay. Put your pencils down. So we divide ecosystem energy flow into 2 categories: producers and consumers. Brooklyn producers produce the energy, and primarily on Earth, that's plants. They are the ones that capture energy from the sun and bring it into our ecosystem. So they convert the energy from the sun into carbo, I didn't leave enough room, hydrates, carbs, mostly sugars, via photosynthesis. They take in carbon dioxide. They take in water. What's the chemical formula for carbon dioxide? C, carbon, and O2. What's the chemical formula for water? So you can hear carbo and hydrate. Carbohydrates have carbon and hydrogen. The carbon comes from carbon dioxide. The hydrogen comes from water. What were the other chemicals in carbon dioxide and water that I haven't mentioned yet? Oxygen. The plants burp out the oxygen, and that's how we get oxygen in our system. Okay. It's a little more complicated than that, but really not much. The amount of energy that the producers can capture, can produce, determines the amount of life an ecosystem can support. This is going to maybe seem Captain Obvious, but if you don't have many plants, you don't have many animals. That explains deserts. Explains the Arctic. Oh, also explains rainforests. Consumers, anything that, what word do you think goes in that blank there? You could say consumes, or we use a shorter word, begins letter E. Yeah. A plant or another consumer. So we're going to talk about food chains. Food chains show the flow of energy in an ecosystem. And here is the big word that we're going to be using for quite a while on the next line. We call each step, I'll put it in red, a trophic level. T-R-O-P-H-I-C. Trophic levels show the feeding and niche relationships among organisms. They're a simple diagram. They're very limited. They never give you the full picture, because if you wanted to do a proper, complete trophic level diagram, you'd have thousands of life forms in it, and we're just going to look at smaller versions. So, on the first level, we have what we call primary producers. Primary what? So these are types of plants. These are the ones that are capturing energy from the sun and through photosynthesis turning it into carbohydrates. So these include plants on land. In the ocean, phytoplankton do this as well. Algae do this as well. So that's level 1. Then we move from producers to consumers. And so the next one we have is primary consumers. Mr. Dewitt, don't I have primary twice in a row? Primary producers, and then we move to the consumer level, and since it's the first consumer level, that's the primary consumer level as well. They are on the second trophic level. They obtain their energy by eating primary producers. This would include, for example, grasshoppers, lots of bugs, lots of insects, beetles. There's more types of beetle than any other life form on the planet. There's a standard joke in biology that if you pick a random human being, there's a 75% chance that they're a beetle, just because 3/4 of life on Earth is beetles. Krill are larger ocean-going creatures, still very, very tiny, barely visible to the human eye, but they eat phytoplankton. What do you think comes after primary? Secondary consumers. They get their energy by eating or consuming primary consumers. What eats grasshoppers? Sure. Probably other creatures as well. Birds eat grasshoppers. What eats krill? Whales, crabs. You know what? Let's go with crabs for now. Smaller creatures, but yeah, whales do too.
Fish also.
Fish is too vague, too generic. Like let's try and be a little more species specific, but yeah. All right. For a candy, and I know I also owe Nick a candy. What comes after secondary? So we have primary, we have secondary. What was that? What did someone say? They were close, believe it or not. What did you say? Close. I will ask you these terms, so you are going to have to learn these. So after secondary comes tertiary. That's the proper term for third. They eat secondary consumers. So frogs are often primary consumers because they're often eating. So we could say then birds might eat frogs. I really should have said frogs eat grasshoppers if I want to build this chain properly. So if you want to, where we wrote birds up there, let's make it frogs eat grasshoppers and then birds eat the frogs. Seals eat the crabs. We'll try and build a little chain here. I think, did I give you a nice picture now? Yeah, picture's worth 1,000 words. Unfortunately, I can't make them color. We often use pyramids, and what we're trying to show with the pyramid, as you go further and further to the top, it gets narrower and narrower, and that's because there's fewer and fewer life forms at each level. So here is a pyramid. We have primary producers, and then we have some herbivores that are primary consumers. Then we have secondary consumers. We often also call them the primary carnivores. Then we have tertiary consumers. And is there stuff that preys on owls? Probably in that little food chain, the owls are probably at the top of their food chain. What kills off owls? Starvation and old age. But there's just not much energy. By the time you keep passing energy up at each level, there's probably not much energy left for the owls to host a large population. Yeah, there's non-natural for all of these, but we're just assuming we have a perfect ecosystem right now. Okay? Again, here's another one. Primary producers, plants and phytoplankton. Primary consumers, we might have a grasshopper. We might have zooplankton. Secondary consumers, we might have salmon or fish. We might have a mouse eats the grasshopper. A snake eats the mouse. A bird eats the snake. A larger fish eats the smaller fish. And then maybe orca eats the larger fish. Little nerd moment. What comes after primary, secondary, and tertiary?
Quaternary. Decomposing.
So, quaternary. No R. Not quaternary. Quaternary. Quinary. Centenary.
Septenary.
Septenary. Octenary, nonary, and denary. Sept, that's a prefix for 7, yes?
Yeah.
That's why September is the 7th month, right?
Yeah.
Count. Is September the 7th month? Yes. Count.
January, February, March, April, May, June, July.
Oct is the prefix for 8. That's why October is the 8th month, right?
It's the night.
No is the prefix for 9. That's why November is the 9th month, right? DEC is the prefix for 10. That's why December is the 10th month, right? What's with our calendar? Why are they not lined up properly?
There was only 10 before.
A couple of Roman emperors changed the order of the months. So initially, in the original calendar, somewhere around 100 BCE, probably around then, September was the 7th month, October was the 8th month, and that's why they had those names. But January and February, I think it was Caesar Augustus, I'd have to double check, they changed the order of the calendar at that time and didn't change the names. But if you've never noticed that those prefixes don't, because when I said that's why September is the 7th month, all of you, oh yeah, that makes it. No, it's not the 7th month. That should bug the heck out of you. And October, oct, that's 8. Octagon, that's 8. How is that not the 8th month? It's not. Our calendar is weird. I couldn't find a word relating for 11. There is one for 12. Duodenary or duodenary, but I think it's pronounced duodenary. I'll be honest, I will not be quizzing or asking you any of those, but you might need to recognize them. If I do a really long pyramid, it might have the quinary and the quaternary and on the diagram. Okay? Yeah.
You forgot the Y.
Oh, I forgot the Y? I don't know why.
Oh, I see what you did there.
So, standard food chain. The sun is a primary source of energy. Plants also need water, H2O, because they need the H from the water, and I should also have them absorbing carbon dioxide as well. That's what gives us our hydrocarbons, our carbohydrates. Grasshopper eats the plants. Here's our primary consumer. Snake eats the grasshopper. Here's our secondary consumer. Hawk eats the snake. Here's our tertiary consumer. Does anything eat hawks? Do hawks have natural predators? Probably not. So what they do is they die either of starvation or of old age. They decompose. Fungi decompose this energy and this matter. The atoms eventually are passed back to the grass. And yes, it is like, what was Simba's father's name? Mufasa, thank you. Blanking on it. I've seen that movie a gazillion times. He says to his child, to Simba, as they're walking, the antelope eats the grass, we eat the antelope, and when we die, we become the grass again. That is the great circle of life, but it's much more complicated than that. Put your pencils down, look up. So, some more vocabulary. You saw some of the vocabulary in the video that we just saw. What do we call consumers that only eat plants? They begin with the letter H. Herbivores. The H is silent, but if you pronounce it, I won't freak out. Herbivores or herbivores. What do we call consumers that eat only meat? Carnivores. What do we call consumers that eat both plants and animals or meat? Omnivores. What are we? We're omni. Humans are, for the most part, omnivores in that we can survive off diets mixed with either. People make various lifestyle choices, and that's fine as well. But certainly our digestive system has evolved that we can handle plant matter to a degree, and we can handle meat to a degree. Could we survive just off grass like the way antelope do? No. So that system we haven't evolved yet. So we need a little bit of both. There's a fourth category. These are called, and this is a word you want to maybe put a star next to, detritivores. It's from the word detritus. And these are consumers that get their energy and nutrients by eating dead things. Dead animals, dead leaves, dead plant matter, and animal wastes.
Turkey vultures.
Yes, but we're typically thinking even more on a microscopic level. We're talking bacteria and fungus. Jimmy, stuff that makes things rot, it's actually, they're not rotting, they're being consumed by often small little microorganisms that you can't see. And if that didn't happen, our world would be covered in waste. Okay? So they feed detritivores at every trophic level. There are detritivores that eat dead plants, dead primary producers. There are detritivores that eat, because anything that survives and dies of old age, or even if it's killed, typically not all of it is eaten. That rotting matter has to go somewhere. The detritivores come in. In fact, food chains based on dead plant and animal matter actually outnumber food chains. The detritivores, if you add up how many detritivores there are, they are by far the most biomass on the planet. By far. It includes beetles and bugs and fungus and all the stuff that gives us the creepy crawlies, but is necessary for our world not to be overrun with waste. Another term is decomposition. That's the breaking down of organic wastes and dead organisms. And then one more term, didn't leave you enough space, sorry. Biodegradation. This is the breaking down of dead organic matter by living organisms. Earthworms, for example. So this isn't necessarily breaking down living creatures. Earthworms don't eat living creatures. They break down soil that's technically dead, but it has organic compound. It has dead remains in it. They break that down even further, and they enrich that soil, and then the plants use that, and the whole cycle starts over again. It's the great circle of life, Simba, the great circle of life.